Well, hello, friends. You are listening to Everyday Prayers with Million Praying Moms, where we are dedicated to helping moms pray God's word for their families in the areas they need it most. I'm your host, Brooke McGlothlin, and over the last decade, we have helped thousands of moms make prayer a priority for their families. And our mission is to help you do the same thing. And I'm happy to tell you that that is not going to change, in spite of the fact that we have a very big announcement to share with you today concerning the future of Million Praying Moms and this podcast. You know, I have been praying personally for my own children for over 20 years now. My oldest at this recording date is getting ready to turn 20 in a couple weeks. And I've been praying for both of my kids since before they were born and sharing about the power of being a praying mom for probably close to 15 years in various ways and in various spaces, leading here and learning about prayer alongside you and having the privilege of teaching you what God has been teaching me so faithfully over the years has been one of the greatest honors of my life. Truly, it has been a privilege to serve you all of these years. But after about 2 years of prayer and seeking the Lord, I want to let you know that I'll be stepping down from my role at Million Praying Moms. So after a brief word from our sponsors, I'm going to come back and share my heart and answer your questions and talk to you about what's going to happen with Million Praying Moms in the future. Please stick around for that. Well, welcome back, friends. I know I dropped a little bit of a bomb on you just before our sponsor information, so thank you so much for coming back after that. So now that the cat is out of the bag, I want to take a little bit of time to share my heart and answer your questions in the next 30 minutes or so, and really just kind of tell you the story of what God has been up to for the last 2 years leading up to this moment today. And you'll notice that I have somebody with me here on the podcast today to serve as host for this episode. She's going to kind of interview me and help me get the story out, and hopefully neither one of us will cry too hard in the process. There really is a lot of joy around this, and I want to say that to start with. There is so much joy and peace around this decision, but whenever you whenever you let go of something that has kind of been your baby for a long time, there's some feelings that go with it as well that may produce tears. So we'll just say that up front. But I'm really happy to have my friend Nicolet Bell with us today. You guys have actually been hearing from Nicolet on the podcast each Friday for the past couple of months. So she's not a brand new voice for you. But today I'd like to give you an opportunity to start to get to know her even better. And there's a reason for that. So I thought maybe, Nicolet, you could kick us off today by just telling us a little bit about who you are, and then we can kind of dive in.
Yeah. Hey, friends. My name is Nicolet Bell, as Brooke said. I am a young mom. I have a 3-year-old little girl and baby on the way. And so I am very excited about that new opportunity in my family's life. Just a huge blessing from God and just our little miracles. And so I have been serving in online ministry for the last 3 years. And before that, I served in the local church for 5 years in family ministry, women's ministry, discipleship ministry, wearing a lot of different hats, as so many of us in the church world do. But my heart is absolutely for helping people learn and know the word of God and applying it in their life. And so I'm so passionate about helping people walk closer with Jesus by reading his word, learning to pray his word. And I have personally been so touched by the ministry of Million Praying Moms. I got to meet Brooke a couple of years ago and have been listening to the Everyday Prayers podcast, as well as reading her books, downloading her downloads, writing out scriptural prayers for my daughter, praying them and learning and growing from her and encouraged by her ministry. So it's just my complete honor to get to be here with all of you today.
Well, Nicolet, take it away. Let's talk and share a little bit about what is going on, what has led us to this moment. And just so that you know, listener, this is part one of a 2-part episode. So this is, as you have already been able to discern, a little bit different than our normal devotional Monday through Friday kind of episode. We felt like you all deserved an explanation and an opportunity to just, again, just hear the heart of what has come into this. And really what we are hoping is that is not so much that you'll hear just me or that you'll hear just Nicolet, but that it's that you'll see God's hand in all of this. Because we want you, we were praying before we got started, and Nicolet prayed that you would actually follow God as he is leading Million Praying Moms. And that is exactly what my prayer is for you. So I hope that all of this that we talk about today will lead you to that point where you're like, okay, I see the hand of God. I see what he's doing, and this is good because I feel good about it. I want you to know that, like, as the person that has, led this ministry for a lot of years now, I know that this is what God is doing, and I have joy and peace, and there is a goodness in it to me. And so I want you to know that there is nothing is wrong. Nothing is falling apart. This is just the way that the Lord is leading us. And so I'll let you kind of kick it off,
Yeah.
Nicolet, and we'll get started.
Yeah, let's jump in a little bit. So what I would love to do for us as we get started today, Brooke, is I know some of the people that are going to be listening today are longtime listeners of yours. They've probably been here since the beginning of the podcast. And some people maybe are newer to the podcast, have stumbled upon it in the last couple of months or weeks or just a little bit. So I wonder if you would just begin by giving us a little bit of a history of Million Praying Moms, and then we'll kind of talk about the transition of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Million Praying Moms actually started out, well, let me say this. I started out in a completely different ministry that led me to Million Praying Moms. So my background is in nonprofit ministry. And when I stepped out of that nonprofit ministry after the Lord gave us our two boys, I really wanted to continue. I just felt this burden. I'm a teacher. Like, that's just, kind of what I am. It's my gifting. And I wanted to find an outlet to continue doing that. And so I began to just share online about raising boys. And so the very first ministry that God gave me, the first online ministry, if you will, where I had the opportunity to speak into the hearts of moms, was called the Mob Society. And Mob stood for Mothers of Boys. And so my then business partner, Erin Mooring, and I, she's home with the boys on social, we put together all this curated this community of writers who were further ahead than we were in the game. And like the thought behind it was that we wanted to raise godly men, and we couldn't find a lot of resources at that time. That now there are a lot more resources, but at that time there were not a huge amount of resources to help us figure out, like, okay, we want to raise good men, right? We want to raise men that contribute to society and are good for the communities, but there's a difference between raising a good man and a godly man. So how do we do that? So we brought all of these people together, and from the very get-go, God gave me the ability to start learning from people who were further ahead than I was. And I've always been so incredibly grateful for that. Prayer, though, was always a foundational element of the Mob Society. Prayer was very much the way that God taught me to mother my children. If you've been listening for any length of time, you know that I refer to my boys as those boys. They're the ones that are like 250% boy, bouncing off the walls, impulsive, aggressive, like they're the ones that the Sunday school teachers would call me about and say, what do I do with so-and-so? And I'd be like, I don't know. If you figure that out, let me know. Like we found ourselves like just desperate for God in that season of my early motherhood. And it's what led me to prayer. And so I started praying, for my kids. And then I started talking about it, and God just developed this amazing, thriving community around the idea of praying for our boys. So in 2018, my then business partner and I really felt like the Lord was leading us to a total shift toward prayer, and not just for boys. So we began to pray about what that would look like, and the Lord led us to the idea of Million Praying Moms. We really and truly wanted to create an opportunity to reach millions of moms with the message that prayer is not a last resort, but it's the first and best response that God's given us to the challenges of motherhood. And so that is, since 2019, we launched it, yes, right before the craziness of COVID. We launched it around Mother's Day Million Praying Moms, and that's what we've been doing ever since. Several years ago, Erin stepped down to go and work in. She's really an in-person ministry person. She's very much an extrovert to my introvert, and she just really felt like the Lord was calling her to her local community, and so she's been thriving in that role ever since. We got to have dinner the other day when I was in her town, and just the Lord has just been so kind all these years to just continue to teach me so that I had something to keep giving. And that's been, again, I said it, when we first started, but it has been one of the greatest honors of my life to have what I feel like is a generational impact on families, on kingdom families. There isn't like, this work is so important because you're not just changing a mom's life, you're changing her child's life, you're changing her grandchild's life, and so forth and so on. And so you can actually see a turn in a family eternity in that way, because a mom will start praying for her children. And that to me is just one of the most exciting things there is.
And I think for me, I was somebody who was kind of used to prayer. I had a relationship with God in prayer, but where you and your ministry really pushed me as a mother, it was funny. I was praying about all these other things in my life. But when it came to my child, I was praying very safe prayers, very God help her as she sleeps, help her not to bump her head, like all of these things,
Yeah.
but not praying big, bold prayers for my daughter. And so you really encouraged me in that, Brooke, and taking that step and really training me and equipping me in how to do that for my girl and how to kind of bring that in, to take what I kind of knew about prayer over here, but for some reason we want to separate that from parenting. And so I
Yeah.
think that's one of the biggest gifts that you've given so many mothers over the years, is just that really pushing us to those big, bold prayers for our children and praying scripture for our children.
I pray
I
so.
just want to say thank you for
Thank you.
that, for my personal experience and my family. And I know so many of your listeners feel the same way.
Yeah, she made me cry before we even started. So here we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. It has been a
Yeah.
pleasure.
Yeah. So now we've got kind of the background story. And so now we're at another crossroads. You described that crossroads of turning from the Mothers of Boys Society to Million Praying Moms. And now we're at another crossroads in the ministry. And you described a 2-year period of prayer and discernment about this. So Brooke, tell us a little bit about that. Why this transition? Why now? Why not just close the ministry? What is kind of led you to this point now?
Yeah. I would say it was almost exactly 2 years ago when I think my oldest son had just graduated from high school, and everything, it's all good. For those of you who have not hit that stage yet, I want to assure you that it's all good, but you do start looking at life a little bit differently when your kids start leaving your home. And even before that happened, it had dawned on me several years before that the stories that I have shared over the years about raising my boys and, the struggles that we've had that have kept me on my knees, that those are really no longer my stories to share. They belong to my boys. And I needed to learn to respect that in a new way. And so God had already kind of done that work in me that I'd begun to do that. In fact, with the book I just released, Praying for Teen Boys, every single story that I tell in that book, I got their approval on first. And I gave them full and complete rights to say, no, you can't share that with, or you need to change this or, whatever. And so thankfully they didn't ask for a whole lot of changes, but I wanted them to feel like they had the right to say no, because right now my kids are, my youngest just turned 18 and my oldest will turn 20 in a couple weeks. And so it's not my life that I'm dealing with here anymore. It's theirs as well and their experience of it. And so that became very important to me. But I also began to feel a season or a sense of unrest. I don't want to say that it was a season of being dissatisfied. I don't want to say like I didn't just all of a sudden quit caring about praying for my kids. I didn't stop. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I probably pray more aggressively now for my kids that they're older than I did when they were younger. It didn't go away. It's amplified, if anything. I still love prayer. I still love moms. I still love merging the two worlds together. And I'll always be a mom praying faithfully for her kids. But I began to feel like I think maybe God is calling me to do something different. And I took time to process it with trusted advisors and, pastors and friends. And of course, my husband and the wisdom speakers that God has put into my life. I began to process that with them, including my former agent, who I've known for over a decade and really understands my ministry well. All these people, I began talking to them, and I just want to pause quickly and say how grateful, if any of you are listening, I am so grateful for the role that God gave you in this process. And I just cannot imagine having done it without you. So thank you to each of those people. But I began to just talk about it. And in that first year, I think I really went through a grieving process. Like I had all kinds of emotions. They were up and down and all over the place. And did I fail? Is this a failure? Is this what is this, Lord, that you're doing? But in the end, I really just felt like he was calling me to something different. And I'll explain what that was in a second. But one of the first things that I had to decide, like you mentioned, was, well, what am I going to do with it? Like, am I going to just close Million Praying Moms? Because there are other ministries that many of our listeners are aware of that are changing right now, that have decided to just close instead of doing anything different. And I value that and I esteem that. And it's a legitimate way to handle when God is calling you to do something different. And so I really did think about it and pray about that. And I just did not feel this sense that the ministry was done. Like I just believed it was very clear to me very early on that it wasn't just that I needed to step out. It was that the Lord had somebody else to step in to carry on and grow the things that he wanted to grow in Million Praying Moms. And so once I made that decision, I began to just pray and talk to other people about it, because I really didn't have anybody. There was nobody that was like on my radar that I said, this is the right person. Like there wasn't somebody that I already knew really well that I just knew in my heart that I needed to pass that on to that person. I needed the Lord to bring me that person. And as you know, Nicolet, because you are that person, God has been very faithful to just provide and give us everything that we needed in that process. So about a year after the first thoughts started happening, the Lord opened up a door for me to go back into a work that I am equally passionate about. And if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you've heard me talk about it. I've written about it in almost every book that I've written. There's an example of some kind from what God taught me in my years working in pro-life crisis pregnancy centers. And I've worked in several across the state of Virginia, one even in North Carolina. I helped get it started right over the North Carolina line early in my marriage. I did my practicum and my internships for my master's degree in these ministries. And God taught me so much of what I know about prayer as we would pray for women who are on the front lines, women making life and death decisions. I just learned so much of what I know about ministry in those ministries. And God called me out for a season, and then God called me back in. And that's where I am now. I'm actually working almost full time in the same local ministry that I kind of retired from before about 15 years ago. I'm working in the same building. I'm working in the same office, and I have the same responsibility. I'm the same job title that I was when I left. And it has just been an amazing year of realizing, or maybe not realizing, but remembering that I actually have more than one passion. There's more than one thing that I really, really deeply care about in this world, and that God has called me to care about. And so I have loved every second, but it did not take very long for me to feel the affirmation after I went back to work that I could not continue to do both ministries. It was just too much. So that's when I began to really look for the person that would take my place. And that's when the Lord brought you.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. Kind of how you and I came to know each other and how we witnessed God's leading in this decision.
Yeah. So I mentioned one of the people that I went to first with this was my former agent, Chip McGregor. And Chip has been a truth teller in my life. I'm an ideas person, Nicolet. I get tons of ideas. The thing about being an ideas person is that they're not all good. And so one of the things, if you're an ideas person, you need to have somebody in your life that will say to you, that's not a good one. Let's move that one on. And so Chip has been that for me in a lot of ways. He's really just been a truth teller, and he'll tell me the way it is. And I have appreciated that and needed that over the years. And so I went to him, even though he wasn't my agent anymore. We still have a good working relationship together. And I went to him and I told him, I said, Chip, what do you think about this? Like, you've known me for a long time, but what is God doing? What do you see? And he was like, oh my goodness, I think this is an amazing move. I think, I really think this is the Lord, and let me think about it and pray about it with you. And so we kind of did that for a while. And then Chip brought an idea to the table for me. Really, I mean, I owe Chip as much in this process as anybody else. He has been so kind and so good to help facilitate certain things for me, even though he wasn't formally my agent anymore. He brought to the table the idea of transitioning the ownership of Million Praying Moms to a company, a publishing house that I had worked with for years already. And that's Whitaker House. Whitaker House they are the ones that are behind the gorgeous, beautiful Everyday Prayers Everyday Prayers library that we have at Million Praying Moms. And we've been working through the fruit of the Spirit, Everyday Prayers for love, joy, peace, patience. We've got more coming. We have Everyday Prayers for the school year. We have another one that'll release later this year. Whitaker House is our partner on that. And so they were already really invested in the ministry of Million Praying Moms. And they felt like old friends. And they felt like in the beginning, before we ever produced our first book with them, I had done some time praying and looking at them and saying, okay, Lord, because I knew I was going to work on a lot of books with them. We'd be together for a while. So I thought, is this a partnership I want? And one of the first things that I noticed about them, if you go and look at the books that they produce, is that they already had a major focus on prayer in the works that they have gotten out there. And that was just such a comfort to me early on. And then as I got to know Christine Whitaker, who leads the ministry, her heart for prayer is tremendous. And I just felt so safe with them from the get-go. And they have proven worthy of that, of that leap of faith on my part over and over again over the years. So when Chip brought that to the table, I was like, oh my goodness, I think that could be a really great thing. But then we still needed somebody to head it up because they didn't have someone necessarily that they thought of. And then it was Chip that said to me, hey, Brooke, I really think you need to look at Nicolet Bell. And of course, you and I had a previous conversation when I released one of my books. I don't remember which one it was. You had interviewed me on your podcast. And so the name was familiar. And I thought, okay, I'll go and check her out. And the second that I started looking and listening, I began to get this feeling okay, I think maybe this could work. And then when you and I first connected that very first time, I told my husband after we got off of our chat, that felt so good. That felt so right. And, one of the things that was really important to me, Nicolet, is that this audience has gotten used to a certain kind of perspective and theology on prayer and motherhood. And I knew the likelihood of finding someone that was a 100% match with my the way I look at scripture, the way I see the word of God and interpret it was low. But when I met with you, I thought, I think it's 99.9. So that was really a comfort to me that God would do that. But that's just what he's done. All this time he has done more than I anticipated. It was sometimes you make a decision and then you really have to wrestle with it and you have to work hard for it. And that's not wrong. I would not say that if you have to do that, it's not the Lord.
Right.
Because he can ask us to wrestle through. And there have been other things in my life that I've had to wrestle through and fight for to get where God wanted me to go. But in this particular case, I just feel like the Lord has said, here you go. Let's look at this over and over again. And every single time I have been like, wow, that's amazing, Lord, that you did. Yes, let's do that. So it's just been, God has been so kind. I was telling a friend of mine the story the other day and on Voxer, and she asked me how things were going and, all that. And I realized at the end of my time with her that I had said, the Lord is so kind to me. I had said it 5 times at the end of that. And I'm like, you know what? I think the theme of this is that God is being so kind, and I'm so grateful for it. And I'm so excited to see where God is going to lead this ministry in the future. I just want our listeners to know that Nicolet and Whitaker House and all the hands that will be involved in this in the future, they just have my full blessing. They have my full support. They have my full blessing. They have my full confidence. I really believe that God is uniquely bringing people together who can effectively move this ministry forward in maybe a way that I just I wasn't meant to do. And I'm okay with that. It's perfect the way he's moving things together. And I trust him. And because I trust him, it's been very easy to trust you all. So I'm very grateful for what he's done.
That's such a beautiful testimony of that. Now, you made me tear up during that, because on the other side of it, I'm going, Chip called me and said, "Hey, I want you to think about this." And I'm like, "What? I don't know about this. I don't know how you do this." And we're going to talk more about that side of the story in our next conversation, where you can kind of hear how the Lord has led me to this. But one of the things that I just think about in listening to that is just all of the steps of faith in this. It's just a matter of just walking in obedience and just following the Lord step for step. Like he steps, we're stepping. He steps, we're stepping. And, we're going to end up where he is leading in this. And even though, it's so bittersweet, to me, it's just so bittersweet. And I know it is to you, Brooke. And we're just not kicking Brooke to the curb. I want everybody to know that. Like, she's going to be acting as a consultant with us, with the ministry, and still just involved in the trajectory and leadership. And, I am not letting her get away that easy, because I have so much to learn still. And she's been such a wonderful mentor to me. But like she said, we are just both so trusting God in this, and we are so confident in him and his leading in this, that it has been just sweet. Just his kindness and his sweetness just have been all over it. And so I want to just encourage listeners today, if you're making a decision in your life, really seeking that next step of faith for you, and really just staying in step with God through prayer. You heard Brooke describe 2 years of prayer and discernment over this major decision in her life. That's when you see God's leading and God's timing, and when you're seeking him in prayer and seeking him in his word. So, we're talking about the ministry of Million Praying Moms today, but for you that are listening, you may have a point of transition in your own life that you're walking through, that this may can serve as an encouragement to you and where you are in that. So, Brooke, as we kind of wrap up our time together, I want to talk about kind of what's next. Let's talk about a little bit about what we're going to talk about in the next episode. We're going to make some changes on Instagram that are happening with this. And then we're going to keep some things the same as well. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I do want to say, and I'm glad you teed it up that way. I want people to know I'm not going away. I'm not like just going to drop off the face of the earth. You will still be able to find me. I still hope to write. I still, like, the whole reason that I have wanted to, well, there's two reasons that I have wanted to continue to invest in the ministry of Million Praying Moms, maybe three. One is because God said so, and like, so when God says so, you just do it, right? The second one is because I am so passionate about prayer and motherhood and what God has taught me. But the other is that I love to write. I feel like, I know I'm not like the best writer on the face of the planet. I do feel like I've grown in it over the years, but it's something I love to do. And I hope that God will continue to give me the opportunity to do that apart from Million Praying Moms. I don't really know what I'm going to write about just yet, but I do hope that God will continue to give me that opportunity. So with that in mind, I'm not going away. So one of the things that we talked about early on in this transition is that what is currently the Million Praying Moms Instagram. So if you're on Instagram, it's like my favorite social media. I am a 47-year-old woman, so there you go. But I love it. So if you're on Instagram, it's just at Million Praying Moms. And that's, many of you already hang out there and look for the daily prayers. And we've had those for years. A couple months ago, we transitioned those daily prayers to an account that is at Everyday Prayers Pod. And we'll put all this in the show notes so that you can find it. But we transitioned the daily prayers, the weekday prayers, over to that Instagram, because what is now Million Praying Moms will become my personal Instagram. So in the next couple months, what you'll see is that at Million Praying Moms will transition to what is now Everyday Prayers Pod, and my name will take over what is Million Praying Moms, which may be a bit confusing, but we'll give you lots of reminders on Instagram so that you'll know what's going on that. So I'll still be hanging out on what is now currently the Million Praying Moms podcast. But I'd like for you to go ahead and just go now. If you're an Instagram user, go and make sure that it's actually Everyday Prayers Podcast. I'm sorry, I said pod, but it's podcast. Go find that now and make sure you're following, because that will make the transition seamless for you. You won't miss the prayers. You won't miss, updates about the ministry, and it will just kind of one day change and become Million Praying Moms, and you'll just keep following and you'll be plugged in and ready to go. So that's probably one of the biggest changes. for right now, the podcast is staying relatively the same. I mean, you have some ideas, and again, we'll explain more of those in the follow-up part 2 of this particular show. But you're right now going to keep it mainly the same, I think. And so you're going to be able to continue getting your weekday prayers here on the podcast and get your inspiration and your quick devotion and figure out how to use that, the truth of God's word to pray for the issues that your children and you are going through. That's all going to stay the same. And then all the other ways that you currently connect with Million Praying Moms will stay the same. The website will be the same. Facebook will be the same.
Patreon.
Those things. Yeah, Patreon, the way that you guys have supported the ministry over the years, which we are so thankful for. And quick plug, please go continue to do that. You can go to patreon.com/Million Praying Moms, and you can learn more about how you can support it to keep it going. But all those things are going to stay the same. It's just not going to be me running it. So you're going to have consistency and that foundation that's not going to change. That there's just going to be a lot of things behind the scenes that change. And then, of course, the point person that God will continue to grow it through will be Nicolet.
Yeah, that's a great description of it, Brooke. I want the listeners to know that I am an avid listener to Everyday Prayers. I listen after I drop my daughter off at school every morning. And so it's so important to me that we can go to Everyday Prayers and get exactly what you're used to getting there, right? Because it's been such an encouragement to me as a mom. So I just want everybody to be rest assured and take a deep breath about that. And like Brooke said, we're going to talk about maybe some things that might be new and different and exciting, but some of these, Brooks, are ideas that you have had over the past little bit, but haven't had the bandwidth to pull it off or figure it out. And so, some of these are you and I putting our heads together and thinking about and dreaming about what God wants to do next. And so we are excited about that. But Brooke, I just want to end our time today just in a huge thank you to you on behalf of your listenership and your community here that God has built at Million Praying Moms, that you've been so faithful for so many years to encourage all of us. And now I'm going to get a tear here, right? We said it was coming, but we just want to say thank you to you. So friends, I just want to invite you, send Brooke an email, send her a message on Instagram, a message on Facebook. Let her know how this ministry has impacted your life, what God has taught you, how he's used her to encourage you in so many ways. And like we said, she's not going anywhere. She's still going to be around, but we are just want to take a minute and just really say thank you for the work that you have done. So much of ministry goes unnoticed, and people don't realize how much time goes into writing a book or making a podcast happen or writing a devotional or writing the prayer calendars that people get every month. But God has seen all of that. And I know that he's so honored by the work that you have done. And I know that he knows all of the lives it has impacted, and great will your reward be in heaven for that. And so we just say thank you, Brooke, for your faithfulness over all of the years.
Thank you so much. I had somebody ask me one time what was the very best thing about getting to do a job like this for so long. And I said very quickly, I didn't even have to think about it, that one of the very best things was having the opportunity to learn from some of the very best, most dedicated, godly women and men that the Lord allowed me to interact with because of this ministry that I would never have had the opportunity to interact with had it not been for this. I am not the same now that I was before. I am an entirely different woman of God now than I was before because God allowed me to do this ministry. And it's such a gift. I hope it's been a gift to my family as well. I think it has. I hope it's been a gift to others. That's always been my prayer. And I'm so grateful to have been able to be a part of it.
The gratefulness is reciprocated. Okay, Brooke, I think we can end our time together with your traditional blessing over all of us. And then we want to invite people to join us back next week. We'll release the part 2 of this episode as we continue our conversation together.
So until next time, friends, the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look with favor on you and give you peace.
Amen.